It's a pleasure to be here. The Accessibility Standing Group has been a vital partner in the work that we've been doing over so many years. So it's my pleasure to be here and speak with you a bit. Dr. Ashutosh asked me to speak about what are we doing within the Internet Society to build a culture of accessibility. So I want to talk a bit about how we got there and what's going on there. As you just heard Sally Wentworth speak about, the internet is for everyone. It's our vision. It's what drives us every day is to look at how do we bring that out there. And as she said, that means everyone. It's not just part of the internet. It's not just part of the web. It's not just part of things. It means everyone, everywhere. We have a view. We've said right now our main mission is to connect the unconnected and protect those who are connected. That means for everyone. We also certainly recognize that accessibility is not just for people with disabilities. All of us at some point in time may at least have a temporary disability. We may fall down and break our arm and not be able to use our hands. We may have some issue that causes us to have low vision for a period of time. We may damage our ears and lose some of our audio capabilities for some time. It is something that is true that accessibility is really for everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about the Internet Society's journey in accessibility. Back in the Internet Society's been around since 1992, and in the early stages of the web, we were blessed in many ways to have one of our main people involved with our websites. Henry has been a strong advocate for accessibility in his own personal passion. So a lot of our early websites, he'd spent time trying to make them as accessible and compliant as he could. Then in 2017, I was actually part of our communications team at the time and led our redesign of our website. And when we were doing this change, we were making some platform changes, going from Drupal to WordPress and doing some other different kinds of things. But a big part of it was, how do we go and ensure that our website, in all the components of it, is fully accessible, fully compliant? Does it meet WCAG 2.0 at the time, AA standards? How does it work with this? We spent a lot of time focused around this, and we had a few community members who made sure we were doing this. I got these long emails about things that we needed to improve, and we worked on that. We continued to do that. We focused around that. In 2019, we launched the Internet Society Foundation website, and this was a great opportunity because we could build from the start. We didn't have any kind of, the challenge with the Internet Society website, of course, was that we had a long history of content that we had to move into things. But with the Foundation's website, it was brand new. So we could make it from the beginning and look at how do you ensure that this is accessible to everyone in some way. In 2020, the Accessibility Standing Group, or SIG at that time, helped create an accessibility toolkit. And that was something that we started to circulate, work with, and go for that. Then in 2023, Dr. Mohammed Shabir, a member of the Accessibility Standing Group, a past chair, at the time, was on the board of trustees of the Internet Society. And the board passed a resolution that basically said that encouraged the president and CEO to, as it says here on this slide, to take steps to build a culture of accessibility within the Internet Society, work toward eliminate barriers. It called upon the president and CEO to develop a plan for websites, to create what we called an accessibility operational framework, and to provide regular reports. We have been doing this. Everything you'll hear me talk about today are things you can find on our website. We are entirely open about what we're doing. So after this was passed and worked through, a question, of course, was, how do you build a culture of accessibility? How do you create that within an organization? And it's a really good question. But part of this was what comes back to what Sally Wentworth just mentioned, that saying, nothing about us without us. We worked with the Accessibility Standing Group, Dr. Shabir, Gunilla Asbrink, who you'll hear later, Jolly, who's running our live streams today, a number of other people who are who have been involved to look at what does it take? How do you get there? What do you do to create a culture of accessibility within an organization? Just this past week, as part of our work internally, we invited a speaker in to talk to our staff. And I loved this saying that he had, which was that success is when teams make accessibility a habit, not something you do once or after the fact. When I get in my car, I buckle my seatbelt. That's just what I do. I feel weird if I don't do that, right? It's my habit. When I park my car somewhere, I lock the car when I leave it. When I ride my bicycle, I put my helmet on. These are habits that are just ingrained. When I eat the last banana in my kitchen, I write bananas on our shopping list. These are habits. These are things that we do in some way. And now, for me personally, when I go and post a message to Mastodon, the social network that I like to use, I just automatically add alt text to my images. It's just something I do. That's what I do. When I upload an image to WordPress, I just automatically add alt text. That's what I do. It's the thing. Those are the kind of habits that we are looking to go and build and work through. So when the Accessibility Standing Group and our staff were developing sort of this plan and things, a lot of these efforts wound up being around awareness raising. The conversation we just had this week, the speaker was someone who was blind and spoke about his lived experience using websites, interacting with services. Those kind of things helped people say, oh, I haven't thought about this. This is not my experience, but hearing somebody else's experience helped people understand these are issues that people out in our community are confronting. The plan talks about education, training, recognition, tools, testing, doing all of these things. When Sally Wentworth became our president and CEO in September 2024, this was a priority for her, was to make these plans, get them set, make them happen, to begin this work. And so in November 2024, the Internet Society Board of Trustees approved two different plans, a website plan and a accessibility operational framework. I'll talk a bit about those. The easy one, of course, is the website accessibility plan. This is work that on how to make our websites, WCAG 2. Now we say 2.x because we're continuing to follow 2.1, 2.2, et cetera. But how do we make those accessible? Again, we've been working on this for a long time. Henry, another person, Ivana within our web team, they've been doing a lot of work on our websites over time, including with our redesign, but even before that and afterwards to work with that. So, when we started to do some automated testing, we were thrilled because we wound up with some very high scores on what the automated testing showed. The picture, for those who are not here, shows some scores that are 91, 99, some very high scores that were there as part of the automated testing. And I'll come back to that. The other part of what we did as well was we redesigned our Pulse website. Pulse.internetsociety.org is our measurement website in pieces. And we have a developer, Garrett, who, again, actually in his own personal passion is very focused around this and helped to rebuild this site and make it even, dramatically more accessible than it was before. But, websites have that challenge. I mean, the automated testing can only show you so much. So what we're doing right now is that we're actually doing accessibility testing by humans with disabilities. We've identified various different user experience, user flows through the sites, and are having it tested by people who are using their assistive technology to go through the site, identify issues, and help us make this flow even better. We're continuing to work with our staff so that they are able to go and be able to upload content. Of course, the ongoing auditing of sites, you have to be careful because, of course, the minute you don't include an alt tag, right, it's no longer compliant with standards. You have to, there's a diligence there. But there's also challenges with sites in general, too. They are more complex. We don't just write a bunch of pages in HTML and put them on a web server anymore. We're using content management systems like WordPress or Django or or any of Drupal or any of these systems that are out there. They're large, complex systems. They have new plugins, software upgrades. Just yesterday, WordPress 7.0 was released. Will that make our websites more accessible? Will it make them less accessible? What kind of interaction will there be with plugins? These are now all of the challenges that you need to work with to ensure that a website continues to work that way. As I've talked about with folks in the past, it's easy to put out a request for proposals for a website and specify that there must be WCAG 2.2 or 2.0 or whatever, and you must say it that. It's easy to have a design with the appropriate contrast. It's, you can develop it, test it, but then it's that operation. It's continuing to make sure that it is part of that. It's a habit, it's a process, it's part of what you need to keep on doing in some way. Now, that accessibility operational framework that I talked about was part of, accessibility is more than just websites. It's also our messaging. It's our video conferencing like we're doing now. It's the live streaming, it's apps, it's, AI systems. It's all of these different pieces. It's also offline. It's events in some way. So the framework, and I can put a link in, it's out there. We talk about how we build this culture of accessibility. How do we provide training, awareness, all of these different pieces? How do we look at minimizing the barriers that are out there? How do we ensure that content's being created from the beginning with accessibility? How do we ensure both in-person and virtual events are as accessible as possible? Using accessible systems, tools, all of these are important components. In the framework, we lay out a timeline over 5 years to go and do things and work through that. Again, with this focus of how do we go and make accessibility really a habit? We're only a year and a half into the whole plan. We started a number of different work. We try to hold all of our events that we do, both in person and virtual, in environments that are as barrier-free as possible. I also would encourage you, if you haven't seen the guidelines for Internet Governance Forum, IGF events, that was created by the IGF, Dynamic Coalition on Accessibility and Disability, or DCAD, those are guidelines for how to create an accessible event. And we've embraced those, looked at them. We've also encouraged any grantees of our Internet Society Foundation. We encourage them to use these guidelines. We're trying to encourage more people to work with these because it's important, and this is something that is there. I'll put a link in the chat afterwards around where. We've also created templates for our staff, for our community. Those templates include a lot of information around how to go and work with accessibility, so it's baked right in there. There is a website that is out there for our chapters to use, and it is designed to be WCAG compliant from the get-go as well. It's out there and working in that forum. We continue to work with the Accessibility Standing Group, events such as this, other meetings that have been in person or calls around there. In 2026, right now, our focus is really on, continuing the auditing, the improvements, the work we're doing. We're doing some internal training toolkits and pieces that we'll be doing around there. I'll talk a bit about something we're looking at is how to bring some of this into our compliance training. And then also looking at what are our internal systems. Could somebody who had a visual impairment be able to really work as part of the Internet Society staff? These are questions and things that we're working on and looking at how do we move through. I'm not going to lie, there are challenges. We are a 34-year-old nonprofit organization. We have about 150 staff people spread around 37 countries around the world. But like most nonprofits, our focus is on the mission. It's on connecting the unconnected and protecting those who are already connected. That is our work. And so, historically, we have not had as much of a focus on our internal systems. Every dollar we spend on something internally is a dollar we're not spending on the mission. So we focus on that. But the side effect of that is that we've developed a complex set of internal tools. We've hired a new vice president for our technology services who is looking at how to simplify that, how to make that easier, because that complexity creates challenges quite honestly, for people without disabilities, let alone people with disabilities. So part of our internal challenges, and this is true of many organizations as I've talked to them. Another challenge, of course, is that we use a lot of external systems. We use cloud services. We host things in different places. We do that. Not many organizations run their own data centers and servers, until you get to a certain size. But those systems are external. And so if you have a challenge, an accessibility issue, they're big systems. You have to kind of raise your hand and try to get in line to say, hey, could you fix this contrast issue on this particular screen? Maybe they'll get to it. Maybe they won't. Maybe it'll be someday. Maybe it will not. That is a challenge. So it's an issue we're doing there. Another interesting challenge we had in trying to do all this was we, like many organizations around the world, our staff are required to take certain compliance modules. These are systems and things that we need to do, once a year or some period of time. And often they're things like what are the best practices or legal issues around, say, bribery or conflict of interest or, using personal computer systems or all these things. They're often, 15, 20 minutes long type of thing. And sometimes they have conversations, Bob and Henry get into an elevator and Bob tells him that, I've got this situation where I might have to pay some, government official to get something done. And Henry might ask, should we really do that? These kind of questions and things. We expected we could find one of these around accessibility with all of the legal compliance issues and pieces. We've actually not been able to find one, interestingly. So we might actually have to go create one. So if anyone in the community is aware of something, I'd love to learn more about that. But the other part comes back to accessibility is always this process, right? It's never done. There's always more that you can do in some form. It all, of course, goes back to that whole piece of that new saying I'm coming to love around looking at how do we make accessibility a habit. I'll end with two more things that we've been doing that are related to this. One is that in 2023, we worked with the Accessibility Standing Group. We funded the Accessibility Standing Group to develop an e-learning course entitled Disability Leadership Training in Internet Governance and Digital Rights. This course became live. It's in our learning management system. You can go to internetsociety.org/learning and you can find out when the course will next be offered. It's something that's there, it's out there, and it's a resource for people that will be out there. So that's it. And then the other thing is that a year ago, we became a founding member of another organization called the Coalition on Digital Impact, or CODI, which isn't directly related to accessibility for people with disabilities, but it's looking at the larger accessibility of content on the internet and focused on the idea of ensuring that people everywhere can navigate the internet in their own language. And that's a different form of accessibility, but another part in this bigger picture of how do we make the internet as a whole, not just the web, but also all of the other services and systems accessible to everyone, everywhere, because we do believe that the internet is for everyone. If you have questions, you can reach me at york@isoc.org, or you can also email us at accessibility@isoc.org. And I'm glad in a last minute or two to take any questions if there are any. Oh, and I see one in the chat. How do you see the Accessibility Standing Group's work aligning with ISOC's broader mission of an open and inclusive internet? And what role can emerging advocates from regions like North Africa play in strengthening that vision? Well, I hope you saw in this that, in my mind, the work of the Accessibility Standing Group is critical to this sense of the internet is for everyone. Because if we don't, it can't be, the internet isn't for everyone if we're 15% of the population is not able to actually use the services and sites and things that are on the internet. So I think this work is critical. We need to ensure all of that, and like I said at the beginning, the critical piece is all of us can make use of, making things accessible works for all of us. it's a critical piece for all of that. So I think emerging advocates, if you look at what some of the other chapters have done, I'll share a link. We've listed out what some of our chapters have been doing recently. There are programs and pieces that are there. You can join the Accessibility Standing Group as a member. You can go into our community portal and be able to add yourself to that. You could connect there with other people to look at what are these programs that you can be doing in your region. I think I am at my time, but I remain available if anyone would like to ask me any questions or send me anything. You can just use york@isoc.org, and I will be glad to get back to you. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you for all you're doing. Let's do our part to make sure the internet truly is for everyone. Thank you.